Islam. The heart of Islam is the Islam of the qalb, it's the Islam of the heart, submission of the heart to Allah, doing so joyfully and laughingly. And that's the message of the sacrifice, the message of Adha. Ultimately, we should be the sacrifice. So بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. آن دلبر من آمد بر من، زنده شد از او بام و در من. گفتم قنقی امشب تو مرا، ای فتنه من شور و شر من. گفتا بروم کاری است مهم، در شهر مرا جان و سر من. گفتم به خدا گر تو بروی، امشب نزید این پیکر من. آخر تو شبی رحمی نکنی، بر رنگ و رخ همچون زر من. رحمی نکند چشم خوش تو، بر نوحه و این چشم تر من. بفشاند گل گلزار رخت، بر اشک خوش چون کوثر من. گفتا چه کنم چون ریخت قضا، خون همه را در ساغر من. مریخیم و جز خون نبود، در طالع من در اختر من. عودی نشود مقبول خدا، تا در نرود در مجمر من. گفتم چو تو را قصد است به جان، جز خون نبود نقل و خور من. تو سرو و گلی من سایه تو، من کشته تو، تو حیدر من. گفتا نشود قربانی من، جز نادره ای چاکر من. جرجیس رسد کو هر نفسی، نو کشته شود در کشور من. اسحاق نبی باید که بود، قربان شده بر خاک در من. من عشقم و چون ریزم ز تو خون، زنده کنمت در محشر من. هان تا نتپی در پنجه من، هان تا نرمی از خنجر من. با مرگ مکن تو روی ترش، تا شکر کند از تو بر من. میخند چو گل چون برکندت، تا بسرشدت در شکر من. اسحاق تویی من والد تو، کی بشکنمت ای گوهر من. عشق است پدر عاشق مرا، زاینده از او کر و فر من. این گفت و بشد چون باد صبا، شد اشک روان از منظر من. گفتم چه شود گر لطف کنی، آهسته روی ای سرور من. اشتاب مکن آهسته ترک، ای جان و جهان ای صد پر من. کس هیچ ندید اشتاب مرا، این است تک کاهلتر من. این چرخ فلک گر جهد کند، هرگز نرسد در معبر من. گفتا که خمش کین خنگ فلک، لنگانه رود در محضر من. خامش که اگر خامش نکنی، در بیشه فتد این آذر من. باقیش مگو تا روز دگر، تا دل نپرد از مصدر من.
It's really beautiful.
It's really beautiful.
I think we can go straight into. If you want, do you want me to read it all, or just we go one by one?
I think going through the whole translation would be nice, just so we get the whole feeling of the, if you don't mind.
All right. No, with pleasure. Actually, the translation was done by Maryam, so that people know it wasn't from us.
Thank you, Maryam.
Oh, it's written there. Sorry. I didn't see it written. Okay. Yalla, bismillah. My beloved came to my embrace, breathing life into every wall and door of mine. I said, tonight you are my guest, O causer of restlessness and ecstatic excitement of mine. He said, I have to leave. There's important business for me to tend in the city, O beloved of mine. I said, by God, if you leave, how can it survive the night, this body of mine? Tonight, won't you show compassion upon the gold-like colored face of mine? Won't your kind eyes be merciful to those lamenting eyes of mine? The flowers of the garden of your beauty will scatter over the Kawthar like tears of mine. He said, what must I do? Fate has poured everyone's blood into this cup of mine. I am from Mars. There's nothing but blood in my fortune and in the stars of mine. No incense will be accepted by God unless it enters this crucible of mine. I said, since your intention is to take my life, nothing but blood could be the sustenance of mine. You are a cypress, a flower, and I am your shadow, I am your prey, and you are the Haidar of mine. He said, none can be my sacrifice except for a rare few, O servant of mine. Jurgis arrives who with every breath, so it is sacrificed anew in the kingdom of mine. Ishaq the prophet is worthy of being the sacrifice at the door of mine. I am love, and when I spill your blood, I will revive you in the resurrection of mine. Take heed, do not flutter in my hand, nor run away from the dagger of mine. Don't show a sour face towards death, so thankful to you would be the embrace of mine. Laugh like a flower when it comes to pluck you, so that you may be sweetened through the sweetness of mine. You are Ishaq, and I am your father. Why would I break you, O jewel of mine? Love is the father, and the lover his flock. From him is born the pomp and pride of mine. He said this and disappeared like the morning breeze, and tears flowed from the eyes of mine. I said, what would it be if you could be kind and leave slowly, O master of mine? Do not rush, leave slowly, my life and world and 100 wings mine. No one has ever seen me rush. What you see is the gentler pace of mine. If the heavens and earth ever tried, they would never reach the footsteps of mine. He said, silence. This horse of heaven walks lamely in the presence of mine. Be silent. For if you are not, you will see groves ablaze with these flames of mine. Utter not the remainder until another day, so the heart flees not from this chest of mine.
So beautiful. Thank you very much, Kenzie. And
You,
even the Persian, I don't understand it, but it was so beautiful.
it's Maulana. We're just pipes, as he,
Yeah,
we're just pipes making sounds.
it's beautiful. Like even like the how the words flow, and it touches the heart.
Yeah, and it's also all the images that come. It's just all the senses kind of wake up with Maulana. I think something that I like. Okay, so the first bait is my beloved came to my embrace, breathing life into every wall and door of mine. I think it speaks for itself. But I like the fact that he came to my embrace. So it's an act of love on both sides. But the gesture comes from the believer, which I think is wonderful. And the idea of the wall and door, in another poem, which I forgot which one it is, Maulana speaks about the wall and door of the kind of the head, and it's the mind, and there's a thief that comes and robs you of your reason and all these things. So these are symbols that he has used in other poetry,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken, right, Sina?
Yep. No.
Yeah.
Just one point. I think it's interesting. So bomb is literally roof,
Yeah.
and that's where people would go to see the moon. Right, for moon sighting, they would go to the bomb, to the roof, to see the new moon, for example, the crescent moon. And that's the moon again in Persian poetry, is the beloved. And dar is the door, that's where the beloved enters the house, right? So you have the bomb, which is above, and then the door inside the house. So you have both transcendence, right? Allah Ta'ala is above us, beyond us, but also within us and here and now. So you have the bomb and dar, the vertical dimension, that's the transcendence of Allah, but also the immanence and the presence of Allah in us here and now.
Next page. I said, tonight you are my guest, O causer of restlessness and ecstatic excitement of mine. So, it's the faithful on the night that the beloved, God visits him. So when he feels closer to him. It's interesting. There's a line by Rabindranath Tagore that's almost exactly this one. I think it's a beautiful line. He said, I have to leave. There's important business for me to tend in the city, oh beloved of mine. So basically God's saying, okay, I'm here, but I have to go. And generally when the city is mentioned, it means like he has to deal with many people, many activities, and this materialism that is not just, spiritual business.
Yes, and I guess this, firaq, again, Maulana's separation, that's, how Maulana starts the Masnavi, Sina khaham sharh as firaq, the separation. So that's the scene of parting, lovers parting. And then Maulana pleads, please stay with me. If you want to go slowly. That's towards the end of the Ghazal.
Yeah.
So that's again the longing for the divine, wanting to be close to the beloved.
But the good thing, I mean, at least here he gives a warning, I'm leaving. Whereas at the beginning of the Masnavi is, I'm just separated, I'm just on my own. So again, here this whole idea of like, if you leave, how can I survive the night? I'm just, nothing in this body of mine, in this envelope, without you. So it's even a more pain because you were with your beloved and he's leaving. So it's not that you're alone looking for God. So for me, it's already a step ahead on the wayfarer's path, because I think for most of us, we're alone. We've never had that encounter. But at least here, Maulana had the encounter and then God leaves again.
Yeah, and I guess there's a saying in English, he who has not loved has not lived. And here the guest, Maulana's guest, is love. Later on, he says, Ishqam. Explicitly, Maulana, he says, I am love, I am divine love. So he says, without you, I cannot live. There is no life without love. So
of course, Maulana asked for his compassion, won't you show rahmah towards me upon my face, which is gold-like color, which I think in Persian it sounds better than in English, but it's, this kind of, you made my face shine in a way.
Yeah.
Through his poetry, Maulana uses either gold-like color or turmeric color, or saffron color, and
sorry, Kansa, it's also the paleness of the lover's face in the gold. And there are so many poems about this. One is from Sa'di. He says, گویند روی سرخ تو سعدی چه زرد کرد? What is it that has caused your rosy cheeks to be pale? And then he says, اکسیر عشق بر مسم افتاد و زر شدم. It's the elixir, alchemy of love that has transformed my copper, which is red, to gold. So that's what has made me pale. It's the elixir of love. It's the alchemy of love that has made me pale.
And again, here he asks for mercy from the kind eyes. So he opposes the kind eyes of his beloved to his own lamenting eyes. So mercy and tears. It's a beautiful image. And here again, from tears we go to flowers. So the flowers of the garden of the beauty of the beloved, they just scatter over Kawthar, no? This fountain, just like tears. So we might imagine that all the drops of water that come out of Kawthar are these beautiful petals, which are just like the tears of Maulana. When you think about it, this is just an amazingly beautiful image. So he said, what must I do? So fate put everyone's blood in this cup that he has, which is, we need blood, no? To live. If we didn't have blood, we wouldn't be alive. But this cup of mine is all of us. We're the cup. I'm from Mars, which is the planet of war, and it's a red planet. There's nothing but blood in my fortune and in the stars of mine. So yeah, so that's it's not just death, it's also life. That's the way I look at it.
And it's a death to the ego. So it's the war against your nafs.
Absolutely. So no incense would be accepted by God unless it enters this crucible of mine. So I mean, the crucible, remember, it's that ceramic or very thick metal jar where you put, whenever you're heating up metal, you put it there. So it basically holds something extremely hot and melted. This is where you pour the molten, basically, before you shape it. So it's kind of the, for me, the way I see it, it has two functions. One, it burns you, and Maulana talks always about his heart being charred and being completely turning black from being cooked, no, in that famous Ghazal, like cooked. So it's that on one hand. So kind of the ego disappears in that, and you have to go through it in order to be, molded in a fashion that's possible. The image also, of course, reminds me, the crucible always reminds me of the tulip. Now, in the sense of that red of the heart, red of the outside, and then the black inside that is burned, which is the symbol of the shahid.
And yeah, ultimately, Maulana is saying no action benefits you unless there's love in it, unless it first enters the crucible of love. Otherwise, there's no point in any action, any devotion. Without love, it's void.
Yeah, and you would be reduced to nothing. Your heart would just, burn with all this love. So here he answers that if your intention is to take my life anyway, so only blood can sustain me, because it is, again, the idea of blood for Maulana in his poetry, it's both. It's life, and it also can be a symbol of death when you lose it. So this blood that runs around and through our hearts is what sustains that love of his. And here it's lovely. It's so the symbol of God being the cypress, we see it in many Sufi poetry, especially Hafiz, is this idea of being very long and tall and especially elegant. So cypress is really a symbol of elegance in Sufi poetry. And a flower. And Maulana is just the shadow, but not just only the shadow, but the prey. Whereas the beloved is the Haidar of mine, in reference to Ali, of course. Like kind of the guide, I would imagine that's what he means in this line.
And in Tasawwuf, they call it fana of al-shaykh, to be fana in the spiritual guide. And then ultimately that's a step towards the fana of Allah. Oh, you want me to cancel?
Whatever you want. If you want me to continue, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So گفتا نشود قربانی من جز نادره ای چاکر من. So in the previous bait, Maulana says, I'm ready to be sacrificed for you. I'm your prey. I'm your shadow. You're my Haidar. Here, the guest, that is divine love, says only rare people, only rare ones can be sacrificed for me. You need to be worthy of that, worthy of being a sacrifice. And you need to be a servant. You need to be an abd, chaukar. So you need to be one of those rare few. And who are those rare few? He gives examples. Jurgis rasad ko har nafasi no kshte shavad dar keshvar man. People like Jurgis. So Jurgis is Saint George. In Christianity, he's called Saint George, but he's also a prophet in Islam. He's one of the prophets between Sayyidina Isa and the prophet. So they say that there was a pagan king. He tortured him several times. Once he was tied to a tree, he was burned, and each time he was revived, and he would be killed again. He would be killed again, and he was revived, and then he would be killed in a new way, and that's why he's one of the martyrs in Christianity as well. But Maulana says the lovers of Allah, they're like Jurgis. Every moment they die again and again and again. that killing of the ego, that killing of the nafs, is a constant battle. It's a constant sacrifice. So every breath, they're sacrificing themselves in the kingdom of love. So and then he says, every moment there's a new Jurgis coming. Yes, Kenzie.
Yeah, I just want to say that Jurgis, this is not Saint George of Saint George and the Dragon. So it's the difference is important.
Yep.
And yeah, and Jurgis is extremely important in the Eastern Church, where you know Maulana was in Konya.
Yep.
So obviously, all the churches around and all, I mean, Konya is called Konya because it was where the icons were made. So there were a lot of icons of Jurgis, and if you enter an Eastern church, you will find it, you know, and it's also one of the most common first name for Christians, let's say in Egypt.
Jurgis.
You know, so it's
and also in Iraq, I believe it's we have lots
and in Iraq,
Jurgis.
Jurgis, yeah. In Persian, there's a proverb, as بین پیغمبر و جرجیس رو انتخاب کرده. Like from all prophets, he's chosen Jurgis. And there's a story about that. They say that you know, there was a fox that caught a rooster, and then the rooster, you know, the rooster is in the fox's mouth. So the rooster says to the fox, "Leave me, let me go," and the fox doesn't listen. And then the rooster says, "Okay, at least in my last moments of life, at least say one of the names of the prophets, so that, you know, the sanctity of that prophet's name, I can die in peace." And then the fox thinks to himself, he says, "If I say Musa, if I say Isa, then the rooster will come out, will run away." So he says, "Jurgis."
That's it's interesting. It reminds me also of a short little like anecdote my dad told me also about the fox and a bird. And so the fox in Iraq we call it wawi. Yeah, wawi. See?
Wawi.
Yeah, wawi. Yeah. So the fox caught the bird, and the bird tricked him. Basically, he told him, "Are you a wawi or a wiwi? By the way, before you eat me." He said, "No, I'm a wawi." So when he opened his mouth, you know, he flew away, you know. And next time, he caught another bird, and he tried to use the same trick because basically it worked, and it was well known among the birds. And he said, "Oh, okay. Before you eat me, can you please tell me your real name? Is it Wawi or Wiwi?" He said, "No, it's Wiwi."
There you go.
Yeah, it's like Jurgis, you know,
Like Jurgis, yeah, exactly. But yeah, he's a martyr, Jurgis. So he was killed several times. And so Maulana says, we need people like Jurgis and like Ishaq. Ishaq النبی باید که بود قربان شده بر خاک در من. Ishaq, the prophet who was worthy of being the sacrifice at the door of mine. So the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim's son sacrificing his son in the Torah, it's Ishaq, and in the Quran it's not named. In the Quran it doesn't say which son it was, Ismail or Ishaq. And there was a disagreement between commentators. Some said Ismail and they had their reasons. Some said Ishaq and they had their reasons. But Maulana in his poems, sometimes he says Ismail, sometimes he says Ishaq, because he's not talking about history. He's not talking about the past. He says again and again, I'm not talking about things that happened in the past. I'm talking about here and now. So both of them, actually, both Ismail and Ishaq were surrendered to Allah. So that surrender is key. That surrender, and maybe that's why the name was not mentioned in the Quran, because that doesn't matter. So you need to be Ishaq. You need to be Ishaq to be sacrificed at the door of love, at the threshold of love. And you know, something I shared with Kanza earlier on. It's interesting, the names, because Ishaq in Hebrew, it means laughter, laughing, and Ismail comes from listening and hearing. So together, the names Ismail and Ishaq is to listen to Allah, to surrender to Allah, and do so joyfully. Do so with love. Do so with laughter. And that's the essence of Islam, according to Maulana, to surrender laughingly, to surrender joyfully. Not because if you surrender with resentment, if you surrender with bitterness, that's not true surrender. True surrender is when you do so with joy, when you do so with happiness, when you do so with laughter. So that's the, Ishaq and Ismail, the listening to Allah with joy, with laughter. And it's interesting, every time Maulana mentions Ishaq, and also in this poem, he also mentions laughter. And he in this poem, he mentions the laughter of the rose, the laughter of the flower. So, man ishqamu chun rizam ze to khun. So love, what it does, it spills your blood. It's interesting, like Persian and Arabic love poems, there's always a lot of violence in it. There's always a lot of blood. But that's because to be a true lover, you need to kill your ego. So, I also remember the Arabic poem. The lover goes and knocks on the door, and then قلت للبواب, and talks to the gatekeeper, هل ترى وصلة? Can I reach union? And then قال لي يصاح مهرها الأرواح. Her bright wealth is your soul. If you want to be a true lover, you should love death. You should be prepared to die. That's but this death doesn't kill you, doesn't destroy you. It will revive you. It will give you a new life. I will revive you in the resurrection of mine. So you lose a life that's not a real life, and you gain a life that is real, and that's everlasting. So hantal natapi that panjayman. So take heed, don't flutter, don't run away. Don't run away from this dagger. You may think that it will kill you. No, it will give you a new life. Don't show a sour face to death, because this is embracing the beloved. When you face death, face it like you're embracing your beloved. Yes, Kenz.
Yeah, and death is your wedding, so
Exactly.
It's a happy occasion.
Exactly, just like Maulana says, "Marge ma hast arusi abad." Our death is wedding with the eternal. Yes, Ali.
Yeah, you mentioned killing the ego, and I was reminded of this story. I think I've mentioned this story a couple of times now, but I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the time of the Prophet, and there's this man who comes to the mosque, and he's just like everybody else, and he prays.
Mm-hmm.
And the Prophet points out to his companions this individual and says, "This man is deeply loved by Allah, and he's deeply loved by the Prophet of Allah."
Mm-hmm.
So the companions are mystified, and they're thinking, well, what is so special about this guy?
Mm-hmm.
So they start following him on his way home, and they observe and see what is so special about this man. And they see that he goes about his business. He works someplace, and he buys vegetables and different things, and brings home. And when he goes home, he doesn't do anything special. He just prays his regular prayers and then goes to sleep, and then wakes up the next day. So the companions, some of the companions, they observe him for a few days, and they see that there's nothing special about this guy, and they're thinking, this guy, what is so special about him? Maybe we heard the Prophet wrong. Maybe there's some other person. So they think that, okay, let's just go and ask this guy. They ask him and say, well, the Prophet said that you're deeply loved by him and by Allah. What do you do that is so special? And the guy thinks and says, well, I don't know if I do anything special, but one thing that has been my habit is that before I go to sleep, I think about all of the things that has happened throughout the day, all of the negative things that people have done towards me. I forgive them, and I forget about the bad things that they've done. And I try to kill my ego and not to bear any kind of hatred or animosity. So that's it, and then I go to sleep and I repeat. But that really shows the value of doing these, having these small habits, which will, of course, throughout time will be important, right? I mean, one drop will not fill the cup, but eventually the drops will fill the cup. and that is kind of the small habits that can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know why people like Maulana can face death with that joy, like embracing their beloved? It's because they've practiced death their whole lives. That's every time you say no to your ego, that's death. Every time you say no to pride, to greed, that's practicing death. So when you've already died, in a sense, when you've already, the ego is died, then death itself becomes sweet. And that's why Maulana says there are also trials and sufferings in this world. You might get sick. These are all partial death. And if these partial deaths are sweet to you, then know that death itself will be sweet to you. But if you face all these trials with bitterness, then know that death itself will be bitter for you. Don't show a sour face towards any of these trials that you face. Be thankful, right? Be thankful, and that's when you will find the embrace of the beloved. The beloved will embrace you, and that's what makes all the bitterness sweet. Yeah, it's interesting, like poetically, because you have turush, which is sour in this, and usually there's a contrast, sour and sweetness. And Maulana doesn't use sweetness, but he says shukr, which looks like shakar, sugar, and that's the embrace. That's exactly like sugar. It's sweet, and that's a thankfulness. That's also sweet. So he says, "Mikhand cho gul chon barkanadet." When death comes to pluck you, laugh like a flower, because it's going to plant you in a garden that then you'll be everlasting, right? So you'll be sweetened. Oh, now he mentions the sugar. You'll be sweetened through the sweetness of mine. You'll have my sweetness, right? So don't be sour. Don't be bitter. Death comes to pluck you. Laugh and be happy. Ishaq toyi man walidet. You're Ishaq and I'm your father. So each of us is Ishaq, and Allah Ta'ala, or the love, divine love, is our father. Don't think that I'm coming to destroy you. Don't think that I'm coming to break you. No, you're my jewel. How can I do that? I'm going to give you a new life. I'm going to give you a new everlasting life. Right? So don't be afraid of those trials. Don't be afraid of that dagger. That dagger is not going to destroy you. It's going to give you a new life. How would I break you? Love is the father. So we're all the offspring of love. We're all the flock. So all the glory, all the pride, it all comes from him. It all comes from the beloved, which is also the essence of love. So that's the main message that love is telling Maulana. And then the rest of the poem is leaving. This guest is leaving, and Maulana is pleading with him. He says, please stay. Please stay. He said this and disappeared like the morning breeze, and tears flowed from my eyes. Again, tears. Maulana says again and again how important tears are. If you want love to stay, you need those tears in the morning. گفتم چه شود گر لطف کنی آهسته روی ای سرور من. If you want to go, at least leave slowly. At least leave more slowly so I can see you more and I can be with you a little bit more. اشتاق مکن, don't rush, leave slowly. You're my life and my world. So my inner life within me and my world. So within and without, I see you. Inside me, outside me, you're everything that I am. A sad paraman, and you're my 100 wings. All my wings come from you. You're the one who gives me wings to fly. And then, yes, Kenzie.
Yeah, sorry. It just reminded me of this poem by Jami, where it's this old man and he's very poor, and then there's this arrogant young man that arrives and tell him, who are you? You have thorns on your back. You're badly dressed, and it's really arrogant person. And Jami turns to him, or the person in the poem turns to him and says, you know, I live, the one who gives me my freedom, which that's why these 100 wings, is all from God. And my freedom is such that I don't have to rely on you for living. I don't have to work for someone like you. I don't have to beg anyone like you. I don't have to. So he's saying how free, like spiritually free he is, because God gave him all these abilities to be close to him, and he provides for him this spiritual nourishment. So I always think of this. It's a beautiful poem by Jami.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, if I may also comment and add to what Kansas just said, it seemed like Buddha, you know, was also, you know, making his walk, and you know, he was in a really very bad shape, you know, after he quit everything, and he was moving from one place to the other, and he was fasting, you know. So this rich person, you know, also approached him and said, "Why are you in such a bad shape, and why are you fasting?" And he told him, "Well, fasting gives me the strength that makes me don't need not need a person like you, you know." So it's also like this spiritual uh, jihad, or you know, struggle gives you ultimately gives you the freedom, you know, to and the strength, you know, to not need to anybody, you know, else, you know, who is like your peer. And this is like Imam Ali alayhi salam says, احتج لمن شئت تكن أسيرة. If you need a person, or you seek help from someone, you will be his captive, basically. واستغني عمن شئت تكن نظيرة. And don't need anyone, you will be there here. وأحسن إلى من شئت تكن تكن أميرة. And help whoever you wanted, or then you will be their master, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you, Kansa, for sharing the Persian. خارکش پیری با دلق درشت.
Yeah, and the last lines is basically, you know, this freedom, you know.
Okay. So in response, Maulana's guest, Divine Love, he says, "You haven't seen me rush. This is not me rushing. What you see is the gentler pace of mine. In چرخ فلک گر جهد کند هرگز نرسد در معبر من. Even the heavens cannot go as fast as I can." So love is fast, the steed of love. Heavens and earth fall behind. They can't reach the footsteps of mine. And then he says, the horse of heaven walks lamely, is lame, langone. در محضر من, in my presence. In my presence, heavens are not fast enough. And khamosh, and be silent. Be silent, because if you're not, then the whole grooves will be ablaze with the fires. And the fire speaks for itself. The fire of love will speak for itself. You will see grooves ablaze with these flames of mine. And then it says, Baqish magu, don't say the remainder until another day. Yes, Kansa.
Actually, I didn't understand when I read the poem, and I read it over and over. What are these groves? What is he? Because I interpret it as within me. Is that what it is? Or is it hell? Or I just couldn't understand.
I think everything. What I understand from it is love comes and burns everything, burns your whole existence. So your whole.
So but it's a good thing. You see,
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what I didn't understand is generally, like when we talked earlier in the third or fourth bait, generally this fire burning is very good.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's be silent, because if you're not, then everything will burn. So it's negative. Do you understand what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think he's saying everything will burn in the sense of going mad, in the sense of becoming a complete majnoon. So You know, there was a passage in the Masnavi we were reading earlier on. And then Maulana says, what comes from the unseen comes in the form of drops, tarashuh. Because if it's a lot of that, if everyone can see the truth, if everyone can see that, you know, from the unseen, then the whole world will go, no one will go, the whole businesses will collapse, right? So I guess this is what Maulana is saying, is saying if you speak plainly, about these things, then the love will come and burn everything. In that passage, Maulana says it's the pillar of this world is ghafla, is heedlessness. And there is a degree of heedlessness that's necessary for the world to go on.
Yeah, there is a very interesting, a really very small, I don't call it a book, but it's like maybe a paper, you know, by Ayatollah, a martyr, Ayatollah Muhammad Sadiq al-Sadr. And I remember I read it back in the 90s when he was alive. He says, why, the title, why did Allah create the shaitan? And basically, you know, he said, he gives an example or a story, you know, of a prophet who goes to a village and he talks to them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they believe in him and they, you know, become good people. And they said, Allah wants to reward you for what, for this, you know, act of faith. And just ask him whatever you want. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer you, basically. And they said, oh, Prophet of God, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this great minnah and favor of making us, you know, believe in him, and we want the shaitan away with our lives. And then he carried this message to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, I'll keep him away. So next morning, the Prophet was walking in the city. He woke up in the morning, he went to the market, and he saw no one there. And he went to the homes, and there were nobody. He was knocking doors, and no one was answering. And he was walking until he got to the graveyard, the cemetery, and
he saw everyone there in the cemetery.
In the cemetery, yes. Everyone was digging his grave. He said, what are you doing, for God's sake?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, Prophet of God, life is short and life is not worth it. And we would love to prepare for our afterlife.
Yeah.
And he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, said, what's going on, my Lord? He said, well, I took away the shaitan from their life. The idea is that the shaitan is a balancing force, which is not necessarily evil. It's necessary for us, you know, to thrive and move on and be propelled and forget about the akhirah, you know, because if we have everything, all the akhirah dominating and prevailing in our brains, then we not build, no go about our businesses.
Exactly. And yeah, that's the balance, right? So there's also that tradition that one of the companions goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I think I've become a munafiq. I've become a hypocrite. And then he says, why? Why do you think that? He says, because when I'm in your presence, all I think about is the afterlife. I have no thought about the dunya. All I think about is Allah and the love of Allah and the afterlife. When I go home with my wife and kids, and I forget about that. So I'm in two different states. So I'm not a mu'min, I'm a munafiq. And then Rasulullah says, no, if you were a munafiq, first of all, you wouldn't have said this to me.
Right.
And secondly, sa'a wa sa'a. There's a time for this and time for that.
Yeah, and this story actually brings us back, you know, to the shade that we always, you know, to go back to replenish. And that Prophet, you know, we asked him, this is the situation. He said, yeah, yeah, he's got, and he's the guide, he's the shaykh, you know, basically.
Indeed.
Yeah, and if I may, we couldn't be compassionate if there were no poor people. We couldn't do sadaqah if people didn't need it, you know. We wouldn't be grateful for walking if we hadn't had people in wheelchairs. I mean, it's
just, exactly. You know, Maulana in Fihi Ma Fi, he says, you know, a baker, on the one hand, the baker wants the people to be full, and that's why he's selling bread. But on the other hand, he wants the people to be hungry, because if there are no hungry people, there's no need for people to come and buy bread.
Yeah, true.
So, and that's true of every business. So evil is necessary. He says poverty is necessary, because if there's no poverty, then there is no karam, right? There is no generosity without beggars. So ye باقیش مگو تا روز دگر. Utter not the remainder until another day. So yeah, inshallah, we'll tell the remainder another day, as Maulana says. You know, Maulana's ghazals are never completed. It's always a continuation, because there is no end. It's all from azal and abad. So there is no beginning, there is no end. That's why Maulana never ends his ghazals. All of his ghazals, it says, and the continuation. There is more. As you know, in the Quran, it says, if all the oceans were ink, it wouldn't be enough. Ma nafadat kalimatullah. The words of Allah, the words of truth cannot be exhausted. Yes, Kenza.
Yeah, and it's also in the Quran. Maryam, she was asked to be quiet, and Zakaria was asked to be quiet also.
Yeah, absolutely. Because silence can say things that words cannot. Words have limitations.
No, and it also, if you're weak, and suddenly you have, I don't want to say revelation, but suddenly you have a spiritual experience. You need silence in order for you to start to understand it. I mean, that's how I read it in terms of Maryam, for instance, or Zakaria. I mean, they had this encounter with God, and so he tells them, okay, be quiet for the next 3 days.
Yes, Surah Maryam, that's a lot of emphasis on silence in Surah Maryam. It starts with Zakaria, silence, and then Maryam also tell them, I've fasted for Allah, and I'll be silent, I won't speak to anyone. There is that theme of the surah is silence, and also separating yourself. So you have the Zakaria who enters a secluded place with Allah, away from the people, and then Maryam, فَاتَّخَذَتْ مِن دُونِهِمْ حِجَابًا, a screen between herself and the people, again alone with Allah. And several stories in Surah Maryam, it's all about distancing from others, from what in Persian is akhyar and yar, others, and being with the yar, being with the beloved. So yeah, that was the end of today's ghazal. Yeah, the main focus was the spirit of taslim, right? And you know, as they say, qalb al-Islam. The heart of Islam is the Islam of the qalb. It's the Islam of the heart, the submission of the heart to Allah, and doing so joyfully and laughingly. And that's the message of the sacrifice. The message of Adha is sacrificing. Ultimately, we should be the sacrifice. We should be the ishaq. The greatest sacrifice on Eid al-Adha is to sacrifice ourselves, sacrifice our ego.